All right. I think I'm just waiting on a mic, y'all. We might need a few more than 3 minutes. We shall wait it out. I guess not, but I can. Woo! Cool. Did anybody get the coffee? Any scores on the coffee? So good. Okay, we have one thumbs up. Okay, we'll take it. Good morning again, y'all. So we are on this series called Under the Sun, where we are in the wisdom literature. And so the wisdom literature is comprised of 3 books of the Bible. You have Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. But because we are who we are, we have sprinkled in a little bit of Psalms this summer as well. But I want you to know that the wisdom literature, it's all asking the same questions, or trying to answer it for us. What does it mean to live well? And how do we obtain the good life? And so when we look at these books, they all give us a slightly different perspective. And that's why when we read the Bible, we have to read it in its entirety and not just zone in on only one section, but try to follow the themes throughout the Bible. So I want to break down these 3 different books. When you look at Proverbs, it tends to be the perspective of this young woman that's very intelligent. But then you have Ecclesiastes that comes along. And I spoke on this a few weeks ago, that Ecclesiastes is kind of like this middle-aged critic that's like, hey, Proverbs, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, girl, but there's a few flaws. It's kind of what Ecclesiastes is saying. And then you have Job, which is this older, wiser perspective that's really gone through suffering and what it means to still follow Jesus. And so all of these together, they point us to how to live the good life. And so today we're zoning in on Proverbs. And when you think of Proverbs, you probably think of those short little sayings, yeah? Anybody? Like, I'm going to read a random one. So Proverbs 15:17. A bowl of vegetables with someone you love is better than steak with someone you hate. So, that's good for us to know. But Proverbs is full of these little wise sayings. And so chapters 10 through 31, we see these sayings. But if you look at the beginning of Proverbs, chapters 1 through 9, it's a bit of a different story. Because if we're paying attention, there's different characters speaking. It's a cast of characters. You have this this fatherly king, and then you have Lady Wisdom that are pointing us towards this life of flourishing. And then you have this wicked man and Lady Folly that are trying to pull us into this life that looks really appeasing, but it leads nowhere good, really. And so today we're going to zone in on Proverbs 8, taking a closer look at the character Lady Wisdom. So the book, again, it depicts wisdom as a woman that's kind of smart about everything. And when I say that, she's smart about work and relationships, sex, money, like you name it. Like she kind of has this incredible way of giving us insight that we wouldn't be able to find on our own. And so the question is, what makes Lady Wisdom so smart? Well, she believes that there is this invisible force in the universe that guides people in how they should live. And this force in the Hebrew is called chokmah. And it's usually translated as wisdom. And so wisdom is also described in the Hebrew as a skill that's formed, kind of like an artisan that excels in their craft of woodworking. You show chokmah when you put it to work and develop the skill of making the good life. And so chokmah, or wisdom, is also an attribute of God that God used to create the world in the very beginning. So chokmah was woven into the foundations of creation, into everything that we see. in Genesis, hokmah, wisdom. And so Proverbs here in chapter 8, it personifies all of God's wisdom as a woman, Lady Wisdom. And so she's this majestic person that takes the stage, and I want to read it to you guys. I put some Bibles in the back. Feel free to get up at any time and get a Bible, or turn to the Bible if you have the Bible app on your phone. I'm a visual person, so pull out your Bibles, look at your phones. If you're looking at your phone, I've never offended, P.S. So in chapter 8, She gives this long speech that is so beautiful, and that's what we're going to look at. And it's broken into 4 parts. But the first, before we get into the parts, it's verses 1 through 9, and it's an intro to her speech. And so I'm going to read it to us. Listen as wisdom calls out. Hear as understanding raises her voice. On the hilltop along the road, she takes her stand at the crossroads. By the gates at the entrance to the town, on the road leading in, she cries aloud, I call to you, all of you. I raise my voice to all people. You simple people, use good judgment. You foolish people, show some understanding. Listen to me, for I have important things to tell you. Everything I say is right, for I speak the truth and detest every kind of deception. My advice is wholesome. There is nothing devious or crooked in it. My words are plain to everyone with understanding, clear to those with knowledge. So this is the intro, that you have this majestic Lady Wisdom standing at the top of a hill, crossroad, declaring, I have something I want to say to you. And it's for all people. She repeats that a few times. She's not hiding her wisdom. She's there saying, I'm trying to shout it out to anyone who wants to listen. I want you to hear the truth. I want you to hear the goodness that I have to say. And so then when we break her speech down, part 1 is found in verse 10. And so part 1, she's really declaring her value. And that verse says, choose my instructions rather than silver, and knowledge rather than pure gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with it. So here she's kind of saying that when we live by God's wisdom, it leads to this valuable life. It leads to this life where there's healthy relationships. We have a fruitful life. We develop integrity in our lives. And these are things that money can't buy. And that's why she's saying it's more precious than these goods, these silvers, this gold, these rubies. And then part 3, I'm going to skip part 2 of her speech for a moment to go to part 3 because she repeats this idea. She's really trying to drive this idea home in verses 18 and 19. I have riches and honor, as well as enduring wealth and justice. My gifts are better than gold, even the purest gold. My wages better than sterling silver. And so, again, earthly riches, it can only take us so far. But the good news is, we have this Lady Wisdom, not withholding any information, not withholding the wise way at all. And so going back to part 2 of this speech, we learn that God's wisdom is very practical. If you look in verse 15, it says, because of me, kings reign and rulers make just decrees. Rulers lead with my help and nobles make righteous judgments. So this is part 2 of her speech, and she's really just, those are only a few words, but she's really addressing leadership and just leadership. And I want to define what leadership is for a moment. Leadership, when we are leaders, we have influence over someone. And that's not just people on the stage. I would dare to say that me in this moment, the worship team, this isn't the moment of true leadership in life. It's behind the scenes, who Brandy is day in and day out, before my wife, my family, my job. Like, that's leadership. Who am I? What does my character look like? This is just a glimpse of who I am. And it's the same though for you. Like, you have influence over someone, your children, like co-workers, maybe at school, like classmates. You have influence with how we carry ourselves, how we speak. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything to have influence, because what we carry is felt. And that's a beautiful thing when we're carrying like God's aliveness, like God's goodness, that radiates without even speaking. And so leadership, good leaders, this is part 2 of Lady Wisdom's speech. And in verse 15, she uses the word decrees, just decrees. And she uses that very intentionally because it means to carve or to engrave. And so it refers to how ancient kings would carve laws of justice onto tablets. So she's saying, good leaders, they confront disorder and injustice by creating laws that are just. Break it down a little more. You and I, we confront disorder and injustice by creating laws that are just. And when we do so, we're drawing upon God's wisdom. When we do that in our everyday life. And so wise leaders become images of the God who also creates by his decrees, carving order out of chaos. Because we know that in Genesis that God did carve order out of chaos. So when we do that as leaders, we are following in God's example there. And so here though, God doesn't really go around anymore. We have the Bible, but God doesn't necessarily write these decrees on tablets anymore. Rather, hokmah, they're woven into creation. He set that up. God set that up at the beginning, that it was already a part of creation, that we could find it. Every generation would be able to find hokmah, wisdom. And so this leads into part 4 of Lady Wisdom's speech, that she begins to claim that she was there at the beginning with God. And she repeats this word and phrase, that how God carved order into the world. And so these are verses 22 and beyond, where Lady Wisdom says, I was here when God split the waters, when God created the dry land boundaries, when God carved the foundations of the land. And this gets pretty deep, which we don't have time for today, but if you're a note taker or want to nerd out, this is really, ancient Israel believed in a 3-tier cosmos. So in this moment, Lady Wisdom is celebrating God's ability to carve out this beautiful world. Like, what a wise craftsmanship that was, to carve this out for us. And I do want to read this to you in 8:30 and 31. I was the architect at his side. I was his constant delight, rejoicing always in his presence. And how happy I was with the world he created. How I rejoiced with the human family. So you have Lady Wisdom there in the beginning, still present. But here she's saying, I delighted when God created the world. And then she said, I rejoice. I rejoice and celebrate the humans as well. There's something good in us that we talked about last week, that as we follow Jesus, we get this opportunity to bear the light. that God breathed the breath of life into us, and this is what we said last week, that there must be something good in us. And here again, Lady Wisdom says, yes, and I delight and rejoice over the goodness that's in you. And this is all a challenge for humans in the likeness of God to go out with divine wisdom and carve our own little spots in this world. Hokmah, to carve. And this is where I get so soft, y'all, that it would be such a joy to follow Jesus and get to our lives be parallel with the Creator that carved out everything, and that Lady Wisdom is saying, go carve. Go carve. Like, go carve out this beautiful life, because I'm here and I'm leading you. Every little carve that you make, I got your back. I'm going to point you to the wise way. If you just listen to me, go carve out your rich spot in this life. But here's the thing. We often, as humans, we reject it. We reject the wisdom and letting the Spirit help us in carving out the right path. But as we read Proverbs 8, and I encourage you to go home and read it this week, that Lady Wisdom presents us with a choice. Will we live by God's order and participate in carving out this beautiful, orderly, just world, or will we live according to our own wisdom, which kind of pulls us back into chaos before God created everything? And so I want to leave you with a few practical tips and application. Because sometimes this can sound good, and it's like, yeah, I want to go live this. I want Lady Wisdom to mentor me, and I want to be like Jesus, and I don't know how to do that practically. And so 2 things that have changed my life that a pastor and a therapist have taught me. A lot of times we walk through life and we ask the question, what's the right choice? What's the good choice? And I one time had a person tell me, maybe you should reframe that. What's the wisest choice? What's the wise next step? Because if you're like me, I could be here, but my brain is also like 5 years over here. And really, guys, we can plan, but the Lord directs our steps. And so maybe we should ask, what's the wise next step? And then the second thing to practically take away, I call it the pause. I don't have anything else more creative than this. It's called the pause. In life, I have learned the world and people and ourselves can demand a lot from us. And it can be very fast. We don't always have to answer people that quickly, just so you know. We put that pressure on ourselves. And there is wisdom in pausing and asking the Spirit, show me the third wise way. Because a lot of times we operate in the binary, that it's either this or that, it's this black and white thinking. What if it's not? And what if we're just called to take a step back and breathe for a moment and invite the Holy Spirit in to whatever we're going through and say, this is my pause. I'm asking for you to show me the wise way. And wait till it comes. And trust and truly believe that when we seek and we ask, that God's not going to let us down. God's going to point us. This whole thing is about the voices that form us. Like, there's a good voice, and I could talk about this from last week. I could talk about it forever, y'all. I love the concept of God still being with us and speaking to us and meeting us today in the here and now. But it's trusting and it's learning that. Hokmah, wisdom, again, It's a craft. That means we're not going to get it perfect every time. So not to put the pressure on ourselves to always have the right answer or the perfect answer, but just we're giving it our best. And as we continue to move forward with ourselves, with community, with Jesus, we're going to sharpen that skill. And that's the beauty in it. That we go literally from glory to glory to glory. That we, as we mature in our faith and in our person, that we look more like Christ. And that is the good news, my friend. So if you are willing to stand with me, I want to bless us all before we leave this week. So as you go into your week, may you have ears to hear the voice of Lady Wisdom calling out to you. When the world urges you to rush, may you give God the grace to slow down. When other voices compete for your attention, may you recognize the voice that leads to life. When you face decisions both big and small, may you seek not only what is popular or easy, but what's wise, that wise next step. And may you hear the God of all wisdom, her gentle, her kind voice, guiding your steps, shaping your inner world, forming you more into the image of Christ, even when you can't see it. And so, my friends, go in peace today, listening to Lady Wisdom's voice and walking in the way of the good life. Amen. Feel free to stick around, y'all. We got freezies over